started. We're going to do a little bit of introductions first, so people who are hopping in late won't miss too much. Does that sound okay, Jason? Good, going? Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Sarah Murky. I am the Community Navigator for the Oregon Department of Energy, managing the Community Navigator program with my colleague Alice Weston, who's serving through the Rare AmeriCorps program with us, who's also on. I'm going to be helping facilitate and moderate today's webinar about the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program, which we are shortening to CREP from now on, CREP, CREP. The purpose of today's webinar is to primarily answer application-related questions for the current opportunity period that closes at 5 p.m. sharp on Friday, May 10th. But before we jump into the presentation, I wanted to start by introducing our presenters for the day, Duard Healy and Jason Knaus. We also have Patricia Phillips on the line, and she will help with any technical support. We also would love if you could put your name and the organization that you're representing in the chat so that we can see who is here from around the state. So please feel free now to put your name and the organization that you're representing in the chat. We'd love to see that. Next slide, please. Before we jump in, I want to give a quick introduction to the Oregon Department of Energy for those who have not heard of us before or this is your first program. Welcome. We go by the ODOE, O-D-O-E. We are not ODE. We leave the Department of Education to the teachers. You will see our vision and mission and what we do on this slide. Our mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Next slide. Now I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. We are recording this meeting and we will post it on the CREP webpage as soon as possible. I will be monitoring the chat for questions and raised hands. Again, if you have technical issues, please send a private chat to the webinar host, Patricia Phillips. She can support you there. Please use the chat feature to send questions to the host and presenters. We will not be using the Q&A portion or feature of WebEx, so please use the chat for that. And when we get to the question period in about 20 minutes, please use the raise hand function to indicate interest in asking a verbal question if you're interested in that or making a comment about CREP. Also, please note our community agreements for this meeting designed to foster an inclusive and respectful meeting today. Be ready to present or listen and ready to learn. Be respectful of others. Learning happens outside of our comfort zones. Listen to learn and not to respond. And thank you for being flexible and patient around any technology needs or changes. And if you need something in this meeting, please ask for it. Again, Patricia Phillips is able to support you in the chat. Next slide. Again, a few words about using WebEx for those of you who may be new to this platform. You can use the raise hand function to ask a question and use the chat function to type out questions. We really want this webinar to be useful for you, and we really encourage questions. I will be helping to moderate and find times to pause and address those questions. For those of you on the phone, you can type *3 to raise your hand and we will unmute you and call on you to ask your question when it is time. And now I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jason, who's going to go over today's agenda and provide details on the funding changes for this latest round of CREP. Thank you, Jason.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and welcome everyone. Just before we get going, I just want to make sure that I take a moment to note that today's presentation from the team is really going to be focused primarily for those organizations and entities that have either had past or are currently have some familiarity with some of the larger details or more minutiae details of the program, and that this is designed really to provide you with information to help you put together your application and the most competitive application. If you are relatively new to CREP and just getting started, but looking to put an application in, we will post a PDF version of the presentation up on our website, on the CREP portion of the ODO website. And all of the underlying items throughout this are actual links. And so I've added a link to a video that we did some time ago that's more of a basic overview of some of the other aspects of CREP that can be helpful. But we'll also be diving into a lot of materials that can be extremely helpful to those that are current or even brand new to the program. And so we'll touch upon those as we move through. And also just want to jump into our agenda. As Sarah mentioned, I'll be running through just reiterating the deadline a few different times during today's presentation. And then I'll also be looking or going over the funding breakout for this round, which is a little different from our prior two rounds. And then following that, Duart's going to jump in and start talking about some really helpful applicant resources. We've done a lot of work on the webpage, create a lot of additional resources for applicants and grantees if you're a current grantee. That's helpful with learning about CREP and again, preparing that complete and competitive application. And then we're going to also jump into a little bit of a brief breakdown on how we wind up doing the review of those applications after they've been submitted and the round ends for looking at eligibility and completion of both an application and project, and then how those projects would then move into the competitive review process. And so with that, and then of course, we're going to get into your Q&A and a couple of final reminders. And so just to get started, I'm going to go ahead and we're probably going to say this a few different times. And that is that the application deadline for this round is May 10th at exactly 5 p.m. Applications must be completed, signed, dated, and hit that submit button before or right at 5 p.m. on May 10th, or they will not be accepted in. So please make a note of that. And one of the key differences in this third opportunity round for the CREP program is that we have gone from a $12 million funding bucket up to an $18 million total funding bucket. Those amounts have increased because last year the legislature granted the CREP program an additional $20 million on top of the original $50 million from the program from a couple years prior. And so how we're going to break that out in this round, we've done a little bit of changing on how we're doing the scoring criteria, and Duart's going to get into more detail on that a little bit later. But because of those changes, we have isolated 4 separate minimum reservations for each of the 4 opportunity announcement types. And as you can see here, for the planning resilience group, we're going to have that minimum reservation of $1 million. For the renewable only, 500,000 minimum reserved. Construction resilience will have a minimum reserve of 8 million. And then of course, balanced by the construction renewable only at 4 million. And you may notice that each of those for resilience is 50% higher than the renewable only. And that stems from the legislative priority of prioritizing resilience projects within the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program. And then you'll also notice that there is a remainder amount of $4.5 million. That will then go to projects across all of the OAs in one single group based on the final scores and the selections. And then if we have any one of those groups that do not have enough applications to get to that minimum reserve, those leftover funds would then go into that all projects the remaining fund for all projects to be awarded. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and toss over to Duart and let him talk about the resources for the.
Hi, everybody. Naturally, as soon as it's time for me to talk, my dog starts barking in the background. So if you can hear that, that's Zia. I'm one of the analysts, as Sarah mentioned, on the CREP program. I look forward to supporting you as you prepare and submit your applications. I'm going to talk about some resources to help you do exactly that. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of the CREP website. Most of the resources, all of the resources in applicant help are in the right-hand column. In the red circle, you'll see some resources. There's a link to the original legislation that started the CREP program, as well as the administrative rules. I encourage you to take a look at the administrative rules. They're well written and easy to read, and definitely helpful if you're going to be submitting a grant. Right below the resources, there's a green button for signing up for email updates. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to do so. You'll receive important program updates like round openings and round closings and other updates as well. Right below that, there are the 4 opportunity announcements. I encourage you to read these and make sure that you're using the opportunity announcement that corresponds to the application type that you're preparing and submitting. Next slide, please. Further down in the right-hand column, there's the applicant help section. A number of great resources here. I'll just point out a couple. There's an aptly named required application documentation guide, and it's exactly that. It's a guide to all of the documentation that you'll need to submit along with your application. Jason's going to be touching on that in a little more detail in a few minutes. Right below that, there's a list of helpful resources, and this is kind of a glossary or an encyclopedia to the other resources that are available. So that's a good one to refer to. Next slide, please. And the last 2 documents in the applicant help section are the application user guides. These contain 2 really helpful pieces of information. They contain step-by-step instructions for using the application portal, and they also contain details of all of the items you'll need to submit responses for. So this can be useful if you want to prepare your application offline, and then when you actually have to go to submit it, you can just simply cut and paste your responses into the portal. We really encourage you to use these resources. We've observed that applicants who do prepare and submit more complete and more competitive applications. So it's worth your time to use these resources. Next slide, please. The last thing that I want to, back one, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. The last thing I want to point out are the links to the actual application portal. So both of these links that say apply online take you to the application portal. And there's also a link for you to submit questions through a form. If you submit questions this way, it helps us track those questions and use our responses in future application help documents. Next slide. So this is a screenshot of the actual portal where you'll submit your grant. The blue buttons that you see here are the buttons you click on to get started with your grant. They will only appear if you're logged in. You can also tell if you're logged in because your name or the login name will appear in the upper right where Jason's name currently is. One thing I do want to request that you do is if you have a login, please test it and make sure that you've remembered your password and you can still get in appropriately. If you don't have a login and plan to submit a grant, please create a login. The CREP team is here to help you resolve any issues that you might have. But as we get towards crunch time, the last couple of days, last 24 hours, when everybody seems to be actually finalizing their application, if we can't get you and help you resolve your login issues, we'd hate for that to result in you not being able to submit your grant on time. So please give that a test now. I'd also like to point out that right below the blue buttons, there's a table right there where your application or applications will appear. Only applications that have the status reason of application submitted have actually been submitted, so definitely check that. And as I mentioned before, the application user guides have complete help on using the application portal. Next slide.
I would just wanted to add one piece on that that Duar touched upon about the portal login accounts. And for some of you that are new or even current, CREP only allows one portal account in order to put in those applications. So one of the reasons it's so important to go in and test that right now, if you have an existing portal account or have even applied to other ODO programs with a portal account, we have seen there being issues that need to be corrected in the back end that we can help you with. But this goes back to what was mentioned a little bit earlier. The last couple of days of the round would not be the ideal time to discover this. This would be the best time so that we can help you with that problem or any of those issues that arise.
And I'd like to build on that also. Since there's only one login that's allowed, only one person can effectively be in the application. So that's a great reason to use the application guide, prepare your responses in advance, and then whoever's actually submitting the application can take those answers you've created through collaboration and just cut and paste them into the application.
Right. All right, thanks, Stuart. I'm now going to jump into doing a brief overview of how we begin the review process of these applications once they've been submitted and the round closes. And this is our eligibility and completeness review of the applications. And one of the first parts that we want to note is that the application for CREP is, as you know, an online application that does support the uploads of both required documentation and even supporting documentation for your various answers within that application. What we do want to make sure that we make very clear is that the expectation is that we'll have all of the answers or responses to the questions entered in the provided fields within the application and in those questions requested format. So in some areas, you may see a question and then it has maybe 4 bullets as a list or numbered or even alphabetical or alphanumeric. And that is how we're looking for that to be formatted. And the reason behind that is it does make the later review of those applications by both internal ODO teams and our external competitive review committee. It makes the applications more consistent and streamlined and easier for us to go through. Also, want to note that the file upload should be supporting or required documentation, and that we need those files named clearly so that it makes sense what that documentation is meant to support. Or if we have documentation that sort of covers multiple things within the response field, we'd like to see some sort of direction of what page of a particular upload we would be looking at in order to make sure that we or our reviewers see that supporting information that you're trying to put forward for your entire application. And one of the next pieces of the eligibility is making sure that we have all the required documentation just to initially pass the application eligibility. And new to round 3, down on the bottom of this page, you'll see that we have links here on this documentation. This guide, the required documentation guide, is up on the website, but we've also put the link here. Those required documents for our eligible applicants, which are public bodies, 8 federally recognized Oregon tribes or community-owned utilities. What we're looking for here is authorization from the governing body of that organization to apply. We're also looking for consultation with the electric utility. And this is for the purpose of ensuring feasibility and making sure that you've, especially within construction projects, have been in consultation and working towards interconnection agreements for your projects. And as well, we're looking for an itemized list of the total project costs and those eligible project costs designated. One note that we want to make that's new to round 3 is that we have created a CREP budget spreadsheet. This is for construction projects only. This budget is kind of a high level rundown of what you anticipate your costs to be, both total and eligible. And you can still upload your local budget that you've prepared, But we want to have this prepared as well. Again, this has to do with our competitive review process to create streamline and consistency across all applications. And also so that reviewers can have a quick spreadsheet or quick snapshot of those costs, and then they can dig into the other budget for more clarification. And then we also are looking for the statement of compliance with state and local laws and regulations, and that you're going to go do correct permitting and all that stuff. There is much more information and specific instructions in that required documentation guide, so please use that. We also, if you're going to have a partner to a project, and partners would not be contractors or consultants, this would be somebody that has a direct interest or even pass-through arrangement on the specific project for the renewable energy system or the planning for a potential project for a renewable energy system. So those partners also would need to provide the authorization from their governing body or their authorized rep. And then you also have required documentation if it's a private business in Oregon to provide proof of that, as well as just some if the partner is the owner of rental property. And again, in that required documents on the website, there's much more information and specific instructions of how to accomplish this. We cannot move your application into competitive review unless we have the required documentation for the application. So just please make a point of that. And in some cases, getting that authorized documentation from governing bodies for public bodies can actually take a little bit of time. So now is a good time to jump on it if you have not already. And I'm going to go ahead and toss it back over to Dewar to walk through our competitive review and scoring process.
Yeah, as you may know, if you don't, CREP, all CREP grants are competitive grants. So there is a competitive review and scoring process that's good to understand. Next slide, please. The competitive review contains a number of criteria. Some of these are specifically related to the legislative and program priorities. This slide contains a summary of that. I'm not really going to read all of these, but I do want to say that it's worth your time to understand these and prepare and submit responses in the application and the corresponding sections, because as we'll see in the scoring criteria a little bit later, each of these do count towards the overall score for within the competitive review.
And I'm just real quick, Dirt, I'm going to add something in that I actually missed a little bit earlier. When I was going through the round 3 funding breakout, I was mentioning that each of those OA funding were 50% of the other, and that was part of a legislative priority. In this particular area right here, this touches upon the other legislative priority that was placed on the CREP program, and that was that 50% of CREP projects over the lifetime of the CREP program would be prioritized and awarded to those projects that have these impacts within our environmental justice or qualifying communities. And that's where some of these items come about that you'll see in the application as well. And I think Sarah's still on with us, and I think this is probably also a really good moment to just break out what environmental justice communities, what that means, or what those definitions are.
Yeah, absolutely. An environmental justice community is defined in ORS as a community of color, communities experiencing lower incomes, tribal communities, rural communities, coastal communities, communities with limited infrastructure, and communities traditionally underrepresented in public processes and adversely harmed by environmental and health hazards like seniors and youth. It's a very broad definition, and you can probably figure out how your community fits within that. So, yes.
All right. I'll also say that that definition, when you're submitting your application, it's actually within the application as well, because it's an important piece of information. All right, next slide, please. So the competitive reviewing process, all applications are read and competitively reviewed by an external committee and also selects Department of Energy staff. A close review of scoring criteria, because of this, a close review of the scoring criteria is highly encouraged. And we'll see that on the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the competitive review scoring criteria. These criteria are in each of the opportunity announcements in section 3.3. They have changed from the previous round. So if you applied in a previous round, we encourage you to review them. If you haven't applied, we also encourage you to review them. And it's important to note the green call out here. There's a single set of criteria for both construction and planning applications in this round. And I'll say it again, please use the resources on the website and the applicant help documents. They're going to help you prepare and submit a more complete and competitive application.
And I'd just like to build on that just a touch more. If you have been involved in the prior rounds of CREP, you will notice that this is a very different scoring criteria, and that the same parameters are going to be used to score both resilience against renewable only projects, so that we're better fitting with the legislative priorities. And that also is one of the reasons why, as I mentioned earlier, why we created the 4 different buckets with minimum reserves, to also ensure that each type of project being proposed in a particular opportunity will have funding available to it. So I just wanted to touch on that.
All right, next slide, please. And back to you, Jason.
Yeah, we also just really quickly want to note, obviously we're here to do a Q&A during this time, but we also know that other questions are going to come up, issues are going to come up over the course of the application period. And so a little different in this round, we have isolated about 45 minutes twice a week. This will start on this coming Monday, where Duart and I will make ourselves available between 2 and 2:45. This is kind of an open Teams meeting with a web link, so I don't believe there's anything to download. You should be able to join via the browser. And this really is just an open invitation as things come up, or to expand, or maybe if you can't think of a question or from this meeting, to come in and ask that. And that will go all the way through May 8th, a couple of days prior to our application close period. And with that, I'll toss back to Sarah. Oh, we've lost your mic, Sarah. We've lost your microphone.
Someone had to do it. So we've already got some really great questions going in the chat. Thank you again. So we'll start there, but feel free to either put your question in the chat or raise your hand if you have a verbal question you'd like to ask. But for now, we will start. Rick Fuller asked, please cover 2.8 requirements for authorized representative and the difference of the applicant contact. Can there be multiple applicant contacts?
So in the application, the authorized representative would be somebody that has the authority from your particular organization, has the authority to sign a contract if that project was awarded. The applicant contact could be one and the same. The applicant contact in the application is going to be somebody who we would then probably more realistically have day-to-day contact with to answer questions, even during the application period. But even moving forward, we would probably wind up having more day-to-day conversations with them about the project or needs or different requirements as we go through the project. If awarded down the line, it's very likely that we're going to wind up compiling several different contacts from each organization as we move through things like reporting and on various aspects of the program. But for the application itself, we just have the space for the authorized representative as well as the applicant contact. And I also will make one quick note on that, is oftentimes us having a specific direct phone number to the applicant contact over a general line is very, very helpful. So please please, if you can, use specific contacts. This information isn't being shared outside of Odo. This is what we use to get in touch. And I hope I answered that question. If not, please feel free to follow up.
I think that was good enough, but feel free to put it in the chat if that was not a good answer. The next question was from Mike and Monica Eng. Is it possible for multiple individuals to access the same draft online application because it will be a joint effort between the applicant and a partner, or is access restricted to a single registrant?
Yeah, so we'd love it if the portal has some technology limitations. So maybe we'll talk to Microsoft about this. But unfortunately, there is only one user account that can access each application, and this is why we really encourage you to use the application user guide that has all the information in it, and you can collaborate and prepare those answers offline, and then it just becomes effectively one person copy and pasting answers into and submitting the application.
The next question is from Christy Davis, who introduced herself in the chat from Silver Falls Library District. Do we have to know which opportunity announcement we are applying for before we can create a login?
Not before you're creating a login. The login really is just to open up and give you access to the portal to then be able to start your application. But definitely would need to know which opportunity you are applying for. That part is definitely critical to the information we need for submitting the application.
Okay. Janice Hardy asked, is your Odo portal unique or tied to any other state Oregon grant portals?
Yeah, my understanding is it's all part of one portal. So if you have a login for a different portal, you can use it here as well.
For Odo programs, but
For
ours
Odo.
is unique. So if you have a login for ODHS or any other business Oregon or anything like that, it is going to be a different one. So if you're applying for EECBG or grid resilience, or you've applied for our low income service provider, that's the same login.
And I just want to do a quick expand on that. This is kind of what I was hinting at a little bit earlier, that if you already have that login in from a prior Odo program, it's still very important to check that login again and see if you can access the CREP portal page. And we have definitely discovered some issues within the back end of our system where you may not be tied to the right organization or need to be tied to the right organization in order to then access the page. And that's why we're asking you to take a look at that quickly. And if you do find that you're not able, contact myself or do it immediately. We should have the ability to correct that for you pretty quickly.
Okay, great. These questions are coming in hot and fast, so we're gonna hopefully get through all of them. Alex Polikoff, I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, from Corvallis Rural Fire Protection District says, can we reuse documentation from an earlier application?
Yeah, I'll take that since I'm in Corvallis also and know exactly where you're at. Yeah, you can. You can take that previous application and we encourage you to look at the changes that have been made to some of the items that you need to respond to. But you can take those responses and literally cut and paste them into your new application. But it is definitely worth your time to review them relative to the list of information that's required in the application before you do so.
And I want to just quickly add to that with just to make sure that we have clarity on that, is that you will need to re-upload documentation to this. This is a new application. You can take those responses. The application has changed a little bit, but I just wanted to make sure for the sake of clarity, no, we do not hold prior documentation from a prior application. It is considered separate in a separate round. So you would need to redo the application and all of the uploads for this round.
Okay, great. The next question, we had two Angelas on this, but one introduced them in the chat from Southwest Lincoln County Water PUD. So I'm assuming that's who asked this question. Are there still plans to have a round 4? you can't get your application in on this round?
Yes, there's not a specific timeline set for CREP Round 4. We are targeting opening that once we have moved through the Round 3 process and created the award notifications and announcements. So the best guess tentative right now is we're looking at mid to late fall of this year.
Right. Brandon from Oregon State University asked if an organization is submitting multiple applications, is there a need or a way to express a desired priority order?
Yeah, so I'll answer that kind of. There really isn't a way to express a desired priority order, and it's really not something we can consider. Really, just encourage you to create quality, great applications for great projects, and perhaps all of your submissions will get awarded.
Great. Jason Pickett from Lowell School District said, if I have the authorization from my governing body, school board, for a planning grant, do I need authorization for the construction grant as well?
Yes, each round of CREP is considered separate, and your planning grant and the authorization to apply and submit for a planning grant is different than the authorization required for the construction grant.
Okay. Ethan Brown said, for planning 76 or 77, can the project replace a failing renewable energy system? For instance, a very old anaerobic digester that is failing.
It is it's hard for us to answer specific project-based questions without getting a lot more information but in just kind of off the cuff, if the new renewable energy system as a part of CREP is replacing an older outdated system, then just off of the limited information we have here, yes, that would be eligible.
Yeah, and one thing I'll build on that, from an eligible cost perspective, the new system would be part of the eligible cost. The demo of the old system would not be an eligible cost.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Emma Martinez from Habitat for Humanity Portland region said, we are a nonprofit and build solar and EV ready homes. Due to funding limitations, we are not able to install solar or EV charging stations, but we do everything to prepare the energy system for future installs. Would I be able to get an offline response as to whether or not this would hinder our eligibility to apply?
Well, if I'm understanding the question correctly, we wouldn't need an offline reply, because this is actually a good piece to touch upon, and that's that that Habitat for Humanity would not actually be considered an eligible applicant for the CREP program. Habitat for Humanity would be an eligible partner with an eligible applicant. So we can expand more on the other pieces of your question, but I wanted just to make sure we clarified that.
The other piece to note, just because he says Portland region, any projects within Portland, even if you found a government or a public body that would support your application, are not qualified. So if a housing complex was built inside of the Portland city limits, talk to PISA, Portland Clean Energy Fund. They do not qualify inside of Portland city limits. The next question is from Mike and Monica Eng again. Can the applicant contact be a project partner, or does that person need to be an employee of the organization?
Yeah, the contact can be a partner, but the authorized rep needs to be the person who is authorized and part of the organization, or authorized by the organization.
Michael in the chat said, what is the allowable administrative cost percentages for grant management?
For grant management, pre-grant, there are no eligible costs for preparing the grant and other items related to submitting for the grant. The other piece of this is that within the eligible applicant organization, those administrative and even project management costs are also not eligible. Those are considered existing day-to-day responsibilities. If you have an outside contractor or somebody administering the grant or doing project management, then those do fall into eligible costs for the CREP funding.
Toby Kincaid from EV Global, would you speak more about the definition and requirements of resilience used in the application?
Yeah, I think for the sake of this meeting, to stay within the Q&A, what I would advise is on the homepage of CREP, towards the very top. Deward covered that a few minutes ago. You will find at the very top a definitions for the CREP program, and within that you'll find the definition for what is considered community energy resilience and what is considered a community energy resilience project or system.
Great. The next question is, can the full application, from Rick Fuller again, can the full application be downloaded in order to collaborate with other entities?
Yeah, and I think we've touched upon this. The application itself cannot, but the application user guide has a list of all the information that needs to be submitted. And so you can download that, prepare your answers offline, and then come back into the portal and copy and paste them. But all applications must be submitted through the portal, so you cannot submit a Word document or something like that and upload it and say, this is my application. You have to submit each answer through the portal, go through the process, click the submit button, and make sure that your application has in fact been submitted.
And I also just want to touch upon that with some information that I had meant to include a little bit earlier, but I think is really important for everybody here. And that's that the CREP application is intentionally designed to be accessible and inclusive for any person that wants to come in on behalf of an agency or organization and create this grant application. So we try to keep it very as uncomplicated as possible. We also try to ensure that we're receiving as clear and concise information in each of those response areas. So one thing I definitely want to note is that within the application, most of the text response boxes are approximately about 2,000 characters. That might be surprising for some people who do a lot of grant writing. We have identified a couple of other areas that may require more information there within a copy paste, and those are bumped up to about 5,000 characters. So it is meant to be a very concise, let's get to the project, let's get to the external benefits that this is going to have and all those responses in order for us to review that information. There may be a couple of sections or a couple of areas where that truly is not enough space for you to get the information across, both to ourselves and reviewers, and that is fine. You can add to supplementary answers through a supporting document, but we still do expect to see the original portion of that response on the application itself.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have 5 more questions and we have 15 minutes. So feel free to, again, put your questions if you have them in the chat, but we're running against a clock here. Bex Walker says, for the question on using ITC, does it mean specifically the ITC that might be filed for in relation to this project, or filed for in relation to this project, or another source of ITC? And can you please define what ITC acronym stands for the crowd?
Well, to be bluntly honest, all I've ever called it is ITC, so my brain is locked into just that, so I can't specifically define that, but that essentially, it's the investment tax credit, I believe, for the renewable energy systems. And Bex's questions, the first part of the question, Bex, is that we're asking that on the application just so that we have an idea if there's going to be an intention to go for the ITC credit or not, or if that's not sure. That has no bearing on the eligibility or impact or even the funding for CREP. It's just mostly another data collection point that we have so that if something arises later on down the line, we're prepared to be able to assist. And one of the reasons that this has come up with a lot of projects is CREP eligible applicants are almost all non-taxable entities. And within the Inflation Reduction Act, it was allowed for the IRS to allow for renewable energy credits in the tax credits under the ITC for non-taxable entities. Prior to that, they'd only been available to taxable entities. So this is really just kind of a data point question, but this does not have any bearing on the application or funding in any way, shape, or form. We do not consider the ITC as an incentive that needs to be added into your application. I hope that last part helped out.
Okay, thank you. Ali Detrio, I apologize again if I'm butchering your last name, from Reimagine Power, says, can a single applicant apply for both planning grants at the same time, or do they have to choose one over the other? For example, can an applicant submit a renewable planning grant and a separate resilience planning grant for two different efforts?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible to do so. And we've had organizations that have submitted multiple applications during one round in the past. So please do. I
Perfect.
would like to add that geographic diversity is a program consideration. So that's just something to take into your calculus when you're deciding if you submit multiple applications.
Great. A few more coming in here. Again, for Mike and Monica Eng, could an application contact provide login credentials, email address, and password to the authorized representative for their final review, signature, and submittal?
Just to jump, that would how you handle that locally would be how you choose to handle that locally. We would not be able to advise on that.
Great. That one was easy. The next one is an important question from Timothy. How does the reimbursement work for partner projects?
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, George. Sorry, I
no,
missed
go
the
ahead.
last one. I was just going to ask you to reread that, Sarah. I
Yeah,
missed the part.
absolutely. From Timothy, he asks, how does the reimbursement work with partner projects?
Yeah, so from a reimbursement perspective, the applicant, the funds are distributed to the applicant, and if you are going to pass that those funds on to a partner, you need to establish an agreement with that partner and handle that in the way that corresponds to that agreement.
Yeah, I think it's one thing just to clarify the language is that Odo views the applicant, if awarded, would become the grantee. Odo exclusively views that organization as the grantee. We do not look at partners as sub-grantees and how we handle those costs. There has been some changes with the most recent legislative session to streamline and make the accounting of partner costs versus grantee costs or incurred, paid or incurred a little bit easier, but that's more to streamline our disbursement process. But partners would receive their dispersed funds through the grantee, not from Odo.
Great. The next question from Janice Hardy says, for the planning grant, are expenses incurred before the application close date eligible for reimbursements or one just after that date?
Just after the application close date.
The application close date or the application is granted and an agreement is together?
You will not know if you're awarded for much further down into the future, but if you have a project that is going to be starting, that you know is going to be starting, eligible costs, if awarded a CREP grant, you can submit eligible costs dating back to the close date of the application period, in this case, May 10th of this year.
Okay, thank you so much. Michael asks, how does pass-through funding from the lead applicant to a CREP partner work? Can a partner own any of the renewable systems or components funded via CREP?
the partner can completely own those concepts. So I think maybe a best way to think about the partner when it's the best way to think about a partner applicant experience is that in a pass-through scenario is that you're working with that organization to submit the CREP grant based on those eligibilities. We see the grantee as who is holding that contract, and we're providing those funds back to the grantee. So it almost becomes as if your applicant then becomes your grantee or becomes your fund to pass through those back onto the partner. But the simple part of this is that we have private projects within CREP right now that are running through those pass-through scenarios. And if I didn't say that clear, I welcome anyone here to maybe.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is with that, there's obviously a clear need to display a community benefit. So there has to show how this project is going to benefit the community, particularly environmental justice communities in the application. Okay, one more question that I'm seeing in the chat. Feel free again, final call for your questions. April says, I was looking through the application in the online portal yesterday, and I didn't see anything that noted character count limits for any of the questions. Do you know where we find the character count limits for each question?
Yeah, that was something I covered here just a few minutes ago that I'd intended to cover towards the beginning of the program, and that is that we do hold the CREP application to be a relatively clear, concise application. The majority of the text response boxes are going to be at a 2,000 character limit. We have identified another handful of characters handful of responses throughout the application where those will be up to 5,000 characters. Those have been identified as areas that would probably likely have maybe a little bit more information. So yes, we are looking for economy and conciseness in the application. But as I mentioned earlier, if there's a particular item or question or a couple of that come up that definitely need to have more as part of what you want to respond with, you can supplement that answer with an upload. But as I also said, we do expect to see a substantial portion of that answer in the text response area on the application itself.
And I'll build on that just a little bit. Most of the items, the responses that have 5,000 characters have a significantly larger space allotted to them. And I'll also take a takeaway of looking at adding those counts to the app user guide if possible.
Great. And this is a fantastic question to end on. Thank you, Lydia from Northwest Housing Alternatives. She says, what is the estimated timeline for making awards this round?
What we are doing in this particular round, you may have noticed on the program homepage, we have the timeline of the entire round on the homepage of the program. In prior rounds, we had gone through our eligibility, our competitive review. We then did all the calculations to create the list for the director selection. And that all happened in a relatively consistent and timely order, each after the other. In this round, one of the items that we are going to be doing a little different in this round is that we are going to be holding that notification a little bit longer so that we can actually get contracts and exhibits and those things ready to go ahead of schedule for the announced awardees. And then that way, once this happens, we're ready to begin moving those projects forward a little bit more quickly than we have in the past. And I'm going to add a piece to this that's not necessarily related, but I wanted to make sure we mention that we have also updated a lot of the resources and guides for current grantees of CREP. That also is an excellent area for applicants to look through because that's going to give you some really good snapshots of specifically what your expectations and requirements will be if awarded. It also will give you really good breakout information for preparing an application for things such as the eligible costs for a planning or for a construction grant, and a lot of other really good resources to pay attention to.
Great. Thank you everyone for submitting all those questions. If you go to the next slide.
I'm gonna
Oh.
jump in with just one comment. It came up in a couple of our questions that had to do with grantees, partners, responsibility, accountabilities. I think the best way to say this, the clearest, is that between the CREP program, if awarded, the applicant, or now the grantee, is viewed by ODO as being the accountable party for the grant, as well as for the project's success. And so when there's a partner relationship involved, that's why it becomes so important for the applicant and the partner to also have a clear local agreement between themselves to ensure the success of that project. So I hope that small clarification helps.
Perfect. Thank you so much. There's one more question, and it's actually kind of a good question. So can we get a copy of that the budget spreadsheet without accessing the portal?
Yes, there's a link to that to be able to, it's going to be a pop-up download, and that is available in the required documents guide that we mentioned earlier, because that would be a required document for the application.
So on the right side of the CREP web page, program web page.
No, it's the required documents guide is in the right side of the CREP program.
Yes.
And inside that document is the link for the item.
Perfect.
Okay, sorry, Sarah.
No worries. Okay, if you could go to the next slide, please. Since we're gonna wrap up here, if you have additional questions and comments, please use the Q&A from the CREP website. It's an awesome opportunity to learn more. And then also you can email us at community.grants@energy.oregon.gov, or use the question and answer form through the portal website that is also on the CREP webpage. Thank you for putting that in the chat, Patricia and Duard. And then we want to, next slide. And then just as a final reminder, the application deadline is May 10th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for all of those of you out in Ontario, Pacific Standard Time. And reminder of that amazing opportunity to spend some more time with Duard and Jason every Monday and Wednesday from 2 to 2:45 on Teams. Please take advantage of that. It's an amazing opportunity to spend some time and dig in to some of your more specific questions. And that's gonna go all the way through May 8th. And thank you so much for attending today. We are ending perfectly on time. Look at that. So thank you so much. We appreciate all your questions, and we look forward to seeing all of your amazing applications from around the state. Thank you.
Thank you.